Thank you for tuning in to Exeter TV. The meeting will be starting shortly. While we wait, let's learn more about Exeter TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast channels 98 and 22. Channel 98 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and replay coverage of government meetings and other town updates. A third channel, Blue Hawk Media, is operated by SAU 16 and can be found on Channel 13, with all your school sports, events, and meetings. You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Biweekly Report, with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive monthly updates about new content, upcoming meetings, and more. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch Exeter TV and hope that you tune in to our other content as well. Thank you for tuning in to Exeter TV. The meeting will be starting shortly. While we wait, let's learn more about Exeter TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast channels 98 and 22. Channel 98 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and
sorry we missed our last meeting. We just couldn't all pull it together. I was not available for that one. But we'll try to make up for it now. So let's start off with a, do we have to do a roll call and now that we're in person? I guess we do. Well, I guess we'll do a quick roll call and then we'll go through the minutes of the July 15th meeting. So I guess we'll start with Mark.
Mark Layton, here.
Here in the room with the rest of us. Peter
Lennon here. Rob Corson here.
And Chris Weeks is here. Amanda is not here. It doesn't look like she was going to try to make it on Zoom, but she wasn't sure if she could make it or not. So first item on our agenda, let me see if I can share this stuff. Where's my agenda? There it is. Let me see if I can share this. I'm going to try to share some documents that we can see on the screen here so we're all looking at the same thing. Just going to go into Zoom. Oops, how do I do this? Share screen. Oh, I look very wet. Okay, there's the agenda for tonight. We'll start off reviewing the meeting minutes from about a month ago, and then we'll look at our calendar for our milestones. I'll give you a quick update on the public safety complex stuff, and then I think the bulk of the meeting we'll spend on the CIP. We can actually start with our FCA CIP item. I know Peter had some comments on that. I didn't have a chance to really look at it too much, so I think that could be the first one, and then the rest of the discussion can be around the other CIP items. I've got a copy of the CIP items that was presented at the planning board a week ago today, actually, so we can look at that up on the board. There's a handful of items that we can probably weigh in on. And then I'll try to save about 10 minutes at the end for some of these other items, just to, if there's anything we want to get to. So let's start with the minutes from the 7:15 meeting. Did anyone have any comments on that? Peter?
On the last page, the second line of the new paragraph, Mr. Weeks asked that they should wait until they get funding to issue the RFP. Mr. Corson said if they, there's a word missing.
Oh,
And that's all.
okay. If they have solid examples?
Whatever Rob thinks he
Oh,
said.
okay.
You're saying the second,
I don't know if you can read it up on the board or not. Maybe I don't know if I can zoom in on that. There we go.
About saw, they saw examples.
Receive solid examples,
Yeah, receive.
sought solid examples, identify. Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, Bob.
I just wondering, instead of the word solid, is it saw? If they saw examples
Oh, I see.
of the product.
yes, that would probably be the,
Because I think we're talking about,
Who's they? The select board?
what was that? I was thinking of
Or-
DPW.
Oh, okay.
yes, we were, actually, it was in reference to the software or whatever they were thinking about for their maintenance, kind of tying their maintenance software together.
Yeah. So for Joanna's benefit, we'll just say, Mr. Corson said if they observed solid examples of the product, which they will get from the RFP process, that will be more compelling. Or saw, or... Does that sound good?
It does to me.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Peter, anything else?
That's it.
No, I think actually the word really was if they saw examples of the product.
Yeah, okay.
Because part of what we were asking about in that scenario was that should we get them to submit a sample, and then if they saw an example of the product, then they'd be much more compelling if they saw what the example was.
Okay. So if they saw solid examples of the product, so that will be the edit that we will request Joanna to put in there. Does anybody else have any more comments on the minutes? I don't have anything myself.
I move we accept the minutes with the changes noted.
Second?
Okay, how do we vote? Mark?
Yes?
Rob?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
And I vote yes too, so we'll accept the meeting minutes amended with that one item on page 3 that passes 4 to nothing. Can't help but use the gavel.
The symbol of authority.
All right, so the next thing on our item, I believe, is just the milestones. And I'll try to pull that up on the board too. No, that doesn't, it's hard to read, isn't it?
So you get August, July, August.
Let me see if I can
Probably can't shut the lights off, right? Because of the cameras.
No, I don't know, probably not. It's too bad, yeah, if we just could control those two lights up by the projector.
Yeah. Let's take this one switch.
So, let me see if I can call out. There was a planning board meeting on August 12th. We weren't able to attend. We didn't have our meeting on the 5th, so we didn't have any questions for any of the department heads at that particular meeting. I saw about half of the meeting. They did record it, and they had the video of it, so if you get a chance to watch that, I would encourage it. I didn't see the whole thing, so I do have a copy of the CIP packet that was at that meeting, and we can go through that in a little bit. So we missed a couple items on here as far as our last meeting to develop questions, and we didn't attend the meeting to ask questions, but there's still the meeting at August 26th, where if we did want to present something there, that we could. Because that's when the planning board is going to vote on the CIP as it was presented.
So we have, in the CIP now, there is one for the FCA, right? So,
I believe there is.
yeah, I'm looking at
Yes.
it now. So, I mean, we got to at least talk to that with
Yeah.
the planning board, right? Or unless they
Yeah.
did already.
So we'll get into the nuts and bolts of that after we go through our milestones here. That'll be the next item that we'll talk about, is the FCA CIP item. Let me just go through any other milestones. So the 26th is the meeting. One of us can attend and present. We'll decide that after we review the CIP items. And then I guess that's the big thing. I don't know if there's anything else that we kind of need to have in our horizon beyond that. Town manager submits CIP to select board sometime at the end of September. And then the BRC also receives the CIP and town budget. So I guess what we're doing now in preparation for the planning board meeting, it will prepare us for those two items too, with the select board and the BRC receiving the CIP.
We should, if we can, I guess it would be preferable to, obviously, if we think there ought to be changes on any item, including the FCA, we should try to get those into the draft, the final draft that Dave gives to the planning board, as opposed to do it that night. Because at that point, it's all going to be new to them. They won't have seen it, they won't have read it, and whether or not they understand it or have had time to think about it, I don't think we should risk that. I think that we should do our stuff as it relates to CIP, to get it to Dave, to see whether or not, at a minimum, he and Russ are willing to change anything in the CIP. And indeed, I guess, it's sort of in the same way as when we had our discussion about the police funding, and we convinced Dave and I guess Russ to reduce that from 400 to 200. I think we should think of doing that again with any of these items, whatever we think about them. So that means we have to do something before the actual date of the 26th. So if we can do it here, then that'd be great.
Yeah, I was hoping that we at least have the conversation, we would come to some consensus by the end of this meeting about that. It might not be fully fleshed out, we might have to go back and sharpen our pencils a little bit, but yeah, I was hoping we'd come up with a framework today as to what we would address at that meeting. So I guess that's the big item, that's the thing that's on our plate for the rest of this month and into September. So does anyone else have any more comments on that?
No.
Okay. So we'll move on to the next item, which is the public safety complex study. I will keep this brief, won't get too deeply into that. So originally, Mark was going to be the FAC representative to participate on the interview team. Once the schedule came out, the schedule for that came together very quickly. Mark was unable to make it due to prior engagements. I was able to fill in
For the interviews.
for the interviews.
Yep.
So I won't say too much about it. I don't know where the town is on their engagement with the preferred designer. I'll just say the 5 firms that we interviewed were all quite strong, and I think the 2 or 3 that people like the most should all be very capable of doing the job. and we'll see where it goes. I believe at this point, the town has started to engage with the preferred designer, and they're going to see if they can strike a deal from there. So it was a good process, a lot of good back and forth, a lot of good questions from the town side. I think the town will be represented very well in this feasibility study process. So I don't know if anybody else has any more questions. I don't even want to say who the preferred firm is yet, just in case.
No, that's fine. I don't think it makes, that shouldn't be information that, because it's a public meeting. I'm just-
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to say too much, because during the interview process, it was very clear that a lot of the firms had watched our meetings to get input on the whole feasibility study thing, which turned out to be a really good thing. I think that level of transparency on our end led to a lot of really good proposals and a lot of really good interest from a lot of good firms. So I think it was good on that end, and now we got to go much darker as we enter into negotiations.
Were there any discussions on schedule, things like that, that people brought up during any of those interviews?
There were, I think the town on our side, we were a little unsure at first, but I believe there's not going to be a big push to do anything for the next warrant article, the next vote.
Oh, there isn't.
Correct, yeah.
So that's an important thing from a CIP standpoint, is to begin to think about where that fits into the slots here. So it'll be a lag year in 2022.
Which I am in favor of. I think we need that 6 to 8 months dedicated to developing that public input and that kind of feedback. So I don't think we were going to do anything between September and December to drive the next step of the process. I think that was too short of time.
It actually may mean that you start later, so that in fact it's fresh in people. I guess the issue is you don't want it to be not fresh in people's minds when you're down to the next vote, right?
Yeah.
Where you're voting on what the next steps are, so that people don't, well, what did we do last year?
I think also, doesn't it come down to is what can be accomplished with the budget that was allocated?
Right.
Those are some questions that I think you may have asked some of those questions in the interview.
We did, yeah.
It was 100,000 allocated, and, is what can be accomplished with that? And if that's not enough, should there be a CIP for 2022
Right.
to try to get some more?
That's to me, would be, again, the thing that plays into our recommendations for the 2022 budget would be, is there any interim step that needs to be taken to keep the ball rolling?
So I think Russ and Dave do have that flexibility if they need to, now that they're talking to a firm. All the firms were accepting of the amount of money for the study, but now that we're actually in negotiations, we'll see what kind of scope they're willing to commit to.
Yeah.
And if we do need a little more, Dave and Russ, I think, would have that flexibility to go back and put something on the warrant. We might have to have a town meeting or some sort of public meeting to discuss it or something. I don't know what they would have to do. But.
So
They could go to the budget committee.
with that, I mean, obviously, we should probably develop an attitude towards whether we support or don't support the idea of having an interim budget for the 2022. So did we?
Yeah.
Maybe that's, I'm just looking at it now, it's a 2023 CIPR item, right? So they're not asking for anything for 2022.
Correct.
But maybe that, to your point, Rob, is our comment should be, is that we should highlight the fact that maybe there might want to be, right, as this feasibility study develops, because I agree with you. I mean, this thing is going to get done in 6 months. It's a long time to bring this back up for another discussion a year from now. Potentially there's going to be some downtime.
Yeah, I mean, they could make the process extend out. I'm thinking, like, if you do at least 3 public meetings, it's hard to do one of those a month. I would say probably every 2 months, maybe, for a public meeting to get some sort of good feedback and to get where people aren't feeling like there's a public meeting every other day that they have to go to, so.
Well, but I would also then, I guess, the one option is to consider, I mean, we're getting into the CIP stuff, but I would say that then you may want to target that it does take that. You may redo the schedule and really say if it's 2023, then let's not do the public meetings a year and a half in advance. Let's get this phased up so that it's fresh. You're hearing the latest from the community prior to this process meeting happening.
So if your end of your public meetings is right before your 2023 budget season, then ultimately it's fresh in people's mind, it's fresh in the budget committee's mind, it's fresh in everybody's mind, so that when they go into that, roll into that next phase, that it really is something that people will either, they have the information they need either to support it or know where they want to vote.
But also you have the latest and greatest world information. So you're looking at something that has changed. And we're not talking about a big, long time period, but a year ago people weren't thinking about a pandemic either, right? Or a year and a half ago. So anyway, I mean that's another advantage is that you're doing this feasibility study with the most accurate world information, I guess, for a better term. But
all right, sorry, didn't want to digress, but I think just figuring.
No, that's all good information. I agree with that completely. I like the idea of taking it a little slower. And I guess when would you think that budget season starts officially? Or like what would, end of September or October? Or?
It would be the middle of, there's a meeting in July where Russ gives the financial picture of the town, like revenues and things like that, and says some things that set the stage for the budget committee. It's a meeting with the budget committee. And then in August, there's the planning board doing the CIP. And then in September, the first session of the budget committee normally occurs. So they get the CIP at that point, at the latest at that point. So you could argue that for budgetary thinking, I'd say no later than the planning board meeting.
Okay.
I would actually say that it would. I know that typically there is during the budget process there is actually a CIP night. Right, where people come in and they talk about and they present the CIP projects.
Oh, you mean at the budget recommendations committee?
Correct.
Oh, yeah, that's in November. That's either late October and November or November.
That's, to me, seems like a more reasonable time. So if you're talking about, let's say, an October timeframe for having a public meeting, because the final public meeting or your final one, right, where people get. This is the
preferred option.
Here's
the money.
Do you, if you want to have multiple, then do you phase one that's closer to the August meeting and then one that's closer to the final budget vote, and so that you don't repeat it with the budget committee. You're getting town input for that, but I think that's something we should probably look at as far as scheduling and where all that stuff should be, and knowing that summertime may not be the best time to have a successful public meeting with a lot of people.
well, so financial question then: if money's allocated in FY21, but it doesn't have to be spent by the end of FY21.
No, obviously, they can accrue it, or extend contract and stuff like that beyond.
So the money that's been in this fiscal year that's been allocated, it can roll over.
Just like they did with the cupola last year.
We need to ask that question, though, depending on, I think we should ask that question.
Yeah.
I think you're right, Rob, but we don't want to be caught by we couldn't use it and they have to ask for more. Like the grant funds associated with building the sidewalk.
Yeah.
I think Rob's right that you can probably roll it over.
Yeah.
But I think that we should ask the question.
No, I agree.
As long as it's encumbered, right? Wasn't that the thing?
It's encumbered,
Yeah,
right.
right.
Encumbered with the contract.
Yeah.
And,
Yep.
Which is what they had the contract for the cupola, they encumbered the money, they did it in the following year, so.
Okay, just didn't want us to have that lock us into having to be done by end of December,
Yep.
right? So.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
But yeah, they should be under contract in the next month, I would assume.
Rob, I don't know whether October's too late.
Well, can I just interrupt for a second? So to put a CIP item in the mix, Dave is going to have to put something in July. So, and based on our early estimates and alternatives that we analyzed that the designer comes up with up to that point, we'll have some rough numbers that they could plug into a CIP item. So they're going to put something in there.
Right, but I don't know how to, square the circle, and I agree with Rob, in August, or the summer's not a great time for town meetings, or public meetings, because everybody's obviously thinking of other things that are going away. But what is it that accompanies that blob of money that's a placeholder in the CIP? And how do we put enough information against it while still sending the signal that there's a way to go in the process, that with the town's people weighing in, so that this shouldn't be viewed as anything more than a placeholder? And I don't know I don't know how to do that.
But I don't think it's, that depends on the approach though, because,
Yes.
that's because the one discussion that we had, that I think they want to be able to go all in, that they want money in the CIP for the design and construction. Right? So it's a number that they're going to get locked into to say, okay, this the number 10 million is, which it's not, it's going to be more than that, that's, once, if that goes into the CIP and that's what gets approved, right, then that's...
No, but yes, it gets approved by the planning board, but between the planning board and the budget recommendations committee and the select board, a lot of things will happen to that number.
I get that, but what I'm saying is that the work, this feasibility study, the reason for this is to come up with an option, with an estimate, and be able to say, okay, this is the plan that the town wants to go forward with, and here's the price tag associated with it. And then I hope at that point that there isn't, through budget recommendations and through other committees, that they start to pick that apart.
Well, yeah, they will.
I know they will, but the point is that the reason why we're doing this entire study is that it's been validated. This is what the community wants.
I agree that. I'm not arguing any of that.
Yeah.
I'm just discussing what's the timing we have to have, so that it's not too late, so that the first thing the public sees is a X million dollar balloon without enough information having been sent to the public so that they don't viscerally react to it negatively. That's all I'm saying.
No, I totally get you. I understand. We don't want to get numbers out I understand what you're saying.
What we also talked about is not just one meeting. We'd
Several
actually
meetings,
talked about a
right.
sequence of meetings.
Yeah.
So the intent would be is, it's like anything else, is you're going to give this to people, people are going to make their recommendations, and then the final meeting, which is, I'm thinking October, is the summary. It's not the beginning. It's to say, this is the roll-up of all of the information that's been gathered to date with public input, and here's the recommendation at the end of that scenario.
Yeah, but I guess it's going to be, because there's so many hands into this, right, with all the different committees, I guess, and then we're talking about a standalone process with a feasibility study that it should have its own process, right? And then, so I understand what you're saying. I don't want to muddle the waters here, but I guess it's, in a perfect world, you do this process, and then you can say to the CIP committees and to this, that this is what the community wants, here's the number. And there shouldn't be a lot of picking it apart, because the process has happened. What we're describing right now is almost just a concurrent processes. A number gets into the CIP, and then we're still having community and feasibility study and going, wow, we're reviewing it, budget recommendations reviewing it, planning board's reviewing it. It's going to be an interesting concurrent if we follow that model where things are happening concurrently, which might be the best model.
But don't assume that it's a concur, as in not time, but as in just putting out the number and having one public meeting. If we get one in during that, before we get to October, we have 1, 2, 3. So we have one in, September, one in October, one in, I don't know when.
There's going to be probably be a couple in the spring, too.
Don't assume that everybody's going to stand up and salute to that.
No. I would assume that there's going to be both. So
that's right. So we have to figure out the not off ramps, but we have to figure out the information ramps, so that whenever the first placeholder goes in, there's something behind it that people can begin to think about, and hopefully in a positive way.
Yeah.
And that's all. So I don't know what that means in terms of when we have that first public meeting.
I would say, Peter, the first public meeting would be either late this year or early next year, I would imagine, just to do some sort of charrette on,
Yeah, if
what do you
Did you go to
think
the
about?
master plan sessions?
Yeah, I did.
So I think it's, to me, that would be a very typical way a process like this would go, is the first meeting is a solicitation, kind of here's the overall project, soliciting responses from people, setting the criteria, goals, conditions for success, and then the next one would be the next iteration of that, and then another iteration, and then finally you'd have.
I mean, I think that'd be interesting. I mean, Dave's not here, I guess. It'd be an interesting process to
Town
talk about
management is here.
both ways, right? About having the study doing now. Kind of the original plan we had talked about was doing a feasibility study over the next 4 to 6 months, and then having this information ready for the next year, right? It'd be interesting to to map it out that way with the town, and then what are the pros and cons, and then the other one is to delay this a little bit, do it as a concurrent process a year from now that a lot of these things are happening, so that there's duplications in some of the meetings.
Do you want me to see what these folks think? Maybe they can help short circuit some of your ruminatings here. So we were just talking, we did a really brief public safety complex study overview. I just said interview process went well. We're talking to a firm. I believe you folks are talking to a firm at this point. That's all I said. I didn't give any more details about it. And then we went off discussing what the project schedule might look like, since we're not really rushing to do anything for 2022. So I don't know if Russ and Melissa, or if you have anything you want to add to that, or clarify, or...
Yeah, I don't, Rustine, town manager. Hello.
Hi.
I don't mind naming the firm. We're working with LaValle Brensinger, so they came out of our process at the top, and they have actually already met with police and fire, so we're working on that right now. And I think you're right on your timeline. I think we're working through the process, so the bulk of the work will be done in 2022, with the idea that we are trying to get something prepared for 2023 for the warrant. That's what we'd like to see. You probably covered that already, but that's where we're at in the process right now.
Okay. So our question, Russ, is whether part of how this discussion started was whether there should be a recommendation, and should we support a recommendation that there is an interim amount of money that bridges, that is in the 2022 budget, that bridges between 2022 and 2023 to have any continuation. So it's just, that was the discussion, and we said if we pushed it out far enough so that it's really that the final decisions are made just as you're going into the 2023 budgeting process, that you don't need that interim money. It would go October 2022, and then you'd vote in March of 2023 for that.
Yeah, I mean, Chris can lend to the conversation too, but I got the sense during our interviews with these firms that they were going to be able to meet the scope that was laid out in the RFQ for the $100,000.
Right.
And the idea was that if they meet that scope for $100,000, then we should be in a pretty good position when we're looking at 2023 to do more. And that was a big question. Do we need some interim amount of money? We had a lot of conversation at the committee level about that, and I think we came to the conclusion that we were going to try to get through it with $100,000 and not add anything to the CIP as sort of an interim step to get us to that 2023 year.
Yep.
So
Great.
During the interview process, the firms all seemed to think that was sufficient too. So, and I just said, we'll see as we get into negotiations what you come out of it with. So.
Yeah, the truth comes in the scope, right?
Yes.
And the scope and fee conversation that you have. I think it's good that LaValle Brensinger came and visited the department. I think that helps us understand sort of what they're about. So I feel cautiously optimistic that we'll be okay.
Great.
Same, but you never know until the contracts are signed, so. But yeah, I don't think we'll need any money in the interim to extend the feasibility study. At least that was the tenor of the input. Any other comments on, well, I guess just to back up then. So just to summarize the schedule discussion we had, is there anything that we want to do, or any questions that we want to put to the town side in terms of schedule or recommendation?
For the public safety complex?
Yes, for the feasibility study. I mean, it sounds like the schedule that they're developing is similar to what we just talked about.
Yeah, I think the only question I would have now is just going back to what role we're going to have in that process, and are you going to continue as or Mark as a liaison, and what information is going to be shared during that timeframe to...
Yeah, that's a good question. Is there going to be like a building committee, Russ, for that, or?
I think
Or a study committee, or?
Well, I think the people that have been involved so far are going to stay involved with it.
Okay.
So we've got one representative from the Facilities Committee sitting in, so I would anticipate that that would be the case, and then that individual could report back to the full committee. I think that's the most efficient way to do it, and it would seem to keep the committee clued into progress reports as the work is going on.
Sounds good. All right, so any other comments on that? That took up more time than I thought.
There's a comment about if the big money is going to be in '23, we need to think about what that means for the other CIP projects. But just that as the background, not anything to do with what's going to get us to that number.
Yes. Yeah, we can bring that up. There was a general items list in the CIP packet I saw very briefly, so that might be the best time to discuss that. So let's move on to the CIP items. We'll start with the FCA CIP item, that's the one we're most familiar with. Oh, and before I do that, let's just say welcome to Melissa. I've heard you're the new assistant town manager, is that correct?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Should I be copying you on all the stuff that we send around too,
We're
or?
filling in for Dave at the moment.
Okay,
Right?
so you're good
Dave
for
is gonna
now.
Stay on, so I will be, if Dave can't be here, I'll,
Okay.
step in, but yeah, you can keep Dave in there.
All right, sounds good. Welcome to the town office. So,
Thank you.
do you have a better office now than when you were in the rec department? Or?
They're both wonderful.
You're getting to be a good politician, very good. So the FCA CIP item. Peter, I've got your notes up here. Do you mind if I project them up there?
No, of course not.
You're okay with that? Okay.
I mean, if you can read them,
Yeah,
I can explain.
zoom in. So I'm going to apologize because I haven't read through this yet.
Sorry.
I've been very busy lately.
Everybody has.
We spent a lot of time on the interview process, so now I'm
I mean,
just...
I can race through why.
Yeah, do you
I did
want
what I
to
did.
lead the discussion on this then,
Sure.
Peter? Thank you.
Okay. The primary motivations I had were to try to make it as convincing as possible as to why this was a different product from what's been done before and why it was necessary, what was the value added to having this FCA done. So even the happies to glads had a significance to me, and that is why wherever there was a word before that talked about assessments, I changed it to studies, because I don't want anybody to argue that it's another assessment. We've already done assessments. Why do we need another assessment? I think we need to make a point, if we're going to have a hope of getting approval for the money, that this is different from previous assessments, and here's the value added. So that's why the words changed in that way. The rest of, I added the database tool was designed to be used on an ongoing basis to support capital and facilities planning of the Department of Public Works, Maintenance Division, and the town manager. I added other clients because, again, I wanted to give people the idea that this is going to be a really useful tool for all of the players in the Exeter facilities determination process. And so I added the ones that we talk about all the time as to who we advise as a facilities committee, but I also believe it goes way beyond just DPW and the maintenance division, and it obviously goes beyond just the town manager and assistant town manager. So that's why that verbiage is there. The last paragraph, which you'll have to raise the paper,
Oh, here you go, okay.
is again attempting to foot stomp why this is important, why it's value added, and what we're going to get out of it. If it's wordy, mea culpa, that's, you guys know me, I'm wordy. When in doubt, when you need more evidence, I'll put it in. And so that's what it was for. And again, if people want to change it, that's fine. But I would urge that any changes still try to meet the objective of demonstrating why this $45,000 is a really good investment for everybody in town. And not just some kind of, assessment that's going to end up on somebody's shelf and not be used.
Yeah, agreed.
I'm in agreement in that anything we can do that supports the mission, I think definitely we want to do that. And I think it's good that the CIP comments reflect that, and also that when we go to represent it, that it's focused on what that goal is.
Because we're going to need to say these kinds of words.
Yeah. So
At the planning board and at the budget recommendations committee, and maybe even the select board, depending on what kind of feedback we get on whether or not the 45,000 appears to be the right number.
Yeah, I mean, we are always asking other people for support, why they're putting out a number too.
Yeah.
So in this case, it was, Mark, I believe you had spoken with someone
Yep.
who does this.
Yep, it was just an estimate from a firm that does these.
And was it based on the actual square footage of the town? I forget.
Yes, it was. We shared the building list with them.
Okay.
And that's a really good point. You could even consider putting in here, but certainly tell that to the planning board
Yeah.
and to the budget recommendations committee and maybe even the select board. So whatever you think about, this is our first best shot to try to make the case as to why this really makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, for the CIP is tough because you can't put a lot of that supporting evidence in there. You just have to make your best case in the 500 words or less that you're allotted in there.
But if it's significant enough that we based it on an estimate that was based on town square footage, that's one or two sentences.
That's all
that explains how we got the 45,000.
That's all the stuff we need to bring to any of these meetings before the planning board, select board, et cetera, so.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is it's still a question of whether or not you want to put it in there as a sentence,
Well, the other thing too, I think what's hard for some people is to make the leap from what we're saying it does here to how does it actually work in practice, or what's kind of a more dumbed down way that this would help the town. And I think showing some examples of how that, like when we've had people demonstrate these tools, one of the things I found compelling was to see, here's a list of all your buildings, here's where costs are going to come up as things age. So like if you need a new roof in 10 years, there's a line item for that. So to me, to kind of see that all played out, like how do you care for your buildings over the next 10, 20 years? Something like that. Examples to show people like with that are very...
Yeah, there's a number of these places have a YouTube video that actually demonstrates these things in action, how they use them, what the tools are, with the reporting tools. So it's something you can literally put the links in there for people to be able to go and see, demonstrate how, something like this functions. I think, like we talked about last time, the maintenance obviously is on everyone's mind between what's happened from an infrastructure standpoint, but also from a condo collapse, is that it's important that a tool be used to track and to manage and to maintain your tools. The DPW already has one for their water treatment, the sewage treatment plant. So it's something that It's not something we don't use. It's something we already use.
So just a process question, is there opportunity to update these? Okay, so this would just, when it goes to the next phase, then this would be updated?
Yeah, just submit any changes to Dave, because he'll bring the final draft to the CIP meeting of the 26th.
Oh, okay, so even for next week? Okay, all right, great.
Do you want to add the justification for the actual 45,000? It's just,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a one sentence.
Yeah, you can just say it's the other,
You want to write it, or?
yeah, I can send it to you.
The other thing is there a second year of this?
Well, that's a good question. In theory, once it's implemented, it should be used year over year, and I'm not sure what.
It should be, as long as it's maintained.
It's not going to be $45,000 a year. I don't know how much it's.
No, I mean, if the town, which I think Dave confirmed, that the town has resources to maintain the database, which should just be updating when something's completed, it's completed, or if something gets evaluated and gets added. I mean, so formally, I mean, it's every 5 to 10 years you should be bringing in another firm to say, the assessment. So yeah.
I'm just, what I'm sensitive to is I don't want to surprise people next year with another CIP request.
Yeah.
Unless we know that, and if we know that we're going to need another CIP request, we should put it in this year in that out year. And if it's not, then we can legitimately say it's just going to be what's the word I want? A modest amount or even less amount of funds
Yeah.
that would hopefully be budgeted for in the regular line items of the town's departments where they normally budget for this.
Yeah, I mean, I
So
think
we don't see a CIP item.
I would, unless these numbers are wrong and it's a $70,000 item to get all the buildings, and that would be the only thing, which, you know what I mean, but I don't believe that that's the case. I mean, that would be
Right.
the only situation that we can't get everything done with the 45,000 and we want to do more. But if those estimates that we have are accurate, which I think they are, you'll get this done, you'll have a database, it needs to be maintained, there might be an operating cost on an annual basis depending on a system that gets selected.
Right.
But that should be
5 to 10,000.
probably less than that.
Well, less than
Great,
that.
Yeah,
excellent.
yeah, you're
It
talking-
would be much less than that.
I just, yeah, again.
I mean, there's just different options for those systems, whether if it's hosted off-site and all that stuff. So.
No, I just, it's not a CIP item then if it's
No.
between the 2 to 3.
And going back to the
Excellent.
cost, is we gave them the total list, and the reality is that in some cases you don't need to do the total list. You do the high priority projects, which is really what we're trying to.
Great.
So, Mark, I guess you're going to
I'll
take
send
the
Peter.
task of,
Well, who do you want me to, I mean, I'll draft a sentence about the 45,000.
Okay.
Who do you want me to send that to you, Chris? Or
Peter, do you want to take a stab at revising this then?
Well, I mean, I hate to say this, I was just going to give this to Dave. So if you want.
send it to Dave?
Yeah, or just, scribble across your copy of it. That'll be the final copy that goes to Dave. I
I can just send him an email on top of yours and just
Okay.
say, please add this sentence, so.
Great.
Yeah,
Also, I don't know, Mark, you had a chance to, so I'll forward the elevator speech stuff too, so that kind of everyone can take a look at just generally what we were thinking about, which mirrors what Peter is talking about, but I think that helps us be consistent in what the messaging is.
Yeah.
And I think that the studies versus assessments and things like that is some of the wording we want to get correct.
okay, so do we need to take a vote at all on approving the revisions to the CIP item and submitting it to the town?
So moved.
Second?
Second. Oh, sorry.
How do you vote?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well, so the motion passes 4-0 to approve Peter's edits, incorporate one more sentence on where the cost came from Mark, and then we will submit it to the town prior to the August 26th meeting. So the next item, take about a half hour, maybe a little less. I guess we can quickly start going through the CIP items. We might need to really crunch this discussion to get through all the items in a half hour. I think what we're looking to do is to provide, well, I guess first we want to determine what our feedback would be. Would it be something written in writing to the planning board, or would it be something presented at the planning board meeting on the 26th? We can figure that out. And then which items do we want to make recommendations on? So up on the board, I'm projecting the first item is, this is one I think we do want to weigh in on. It's $75,000 for the DPW to conduct more design and study on their facilities, on upgrading their facilities. So I think this is kind of a continuation of what we talked about with Jen and the DPW last year.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure where the $75,000 is coming from. I mean, there's a little bit described in here.
I guess I'd like to go back to first principles again. You know, we have yet to even we haven't gotten any information answering our questions from the Department of Public Works. The questions, the lack of information of which we based our recommendation approved by the Select Board to not fund anything. So I have two questions about the $75,000. A, do we recommend anything, again, based on the complete and total lack of information that the Department of Public Works has been willing to provide? A. B, are we thinking about this in the wrong way? Should we be thinking about doing the Public Works Department in the same way we've done the public safety study? Do we need an operational analysis of the Public Works Department that leads into a feasibility study of the Public Works, for the Public Works Department project that follows the same process that we've established, I think, both successfully and convincingly, for the Public Safety Center? I would argue that at a minimum, before we give them any money for them to do what they think they want to do, we need to consider whether or not what they think they want to do really makes sense. And the only way I know how to do that is to have somebody outside of the Public Works Department who knows a ton about public works to do the kind of operational analysis that we got for the police and fire departments. If we don't think that's possible or necessary, at a minimum, I think we need to have some kind of feasibility study. Now, I don't know what the feasibility study is of, because, you know, Public Works doesn't seem to be able to tell anybody or want to tell anybody. But I think we need to really think about whether or not, especially given the lack of information, we don't fund the $75,000, or we fund some subset of that money for something different to put them on the same path of success that we hope we've put the Public Safety Center on.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And when I look at the CIP description, $75,000 so that the architect and site engineer can collaborate on locating facilities and fuel islands with site circulation in mind. So again, I mean, this is just a CIP blurb. I'm not sure if there's more of a scope breakdown on what the $75,000 gets the DPW from their design firm, so.
Right, but even if there...
Sounds like Russ might be able to weigh in a little more on that.
Yeah, I didn't, the only thing I wanted to say was, the CIP is not a funding document, it's a planning document, so the figures that are put into the CIP aren't, they go through that process, then the CIP is adopted, and then that document is transferred over to the Budget Recommendations Committee for the real work on the financial end. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that that's the process. So this is more of a planning document than it is a financial document. So when you're talking about numbers and what to fund and, you know, what should be funded and what shouldn't be funded, that's really the BRC that gets into that mode. So I just wanted to kind of lay that out.
So with that, Russ, should focus really on the text and what is the description of work that they would like to have done.
Yeah, maybe some questions. I mean, if you have some questions, that kind of thing, that you want to put to Public Works to answer, I think that's within reason. That makes sense.
Okay, Russ, I agree with you up to a point. If it's a document, a planning document, the numbers of which inside don't have any relevance or any impact, then there's no point in having any numbers inside. If there are numbers there that are supposed to mean something to give the planning process some rough idea of what something might cost, then we ought to put in the best number we have at this particular time. That's my opinion. In the same way that last year, because we got a $400,000 item for the public safety feasibility study, which wasn't even called then that, and it was reduced before it went to the planning board to $200,000 based on the inputs of this committee. Now, I think that's still valid to take the expertise of the people who do this kind of work and try to get the right number for whatever it is we want to have done. So whether it's 75,000 or 35,000, I think the number's got to mean something. It's got to have something. It's not as if you got to give some guidance to the Budget Recommendations Committee. Sure, they have to noodle on the details, but if the numbers have any meaning at all, even from a planning point of view, that argues for the best number possible. And right now, there's no justification for the 75,000. Sure, we can ask questions for them. You're going to have to push them to give us the answers, but the number needs to have some relevance and some significance beyond just it's a planning document, in my mind. Just my opinion. And I know you're not saying that, but we need to push for the best possible number in addition to the best possible scope for what's done, even as part of the CIP.
I'll just let you continue your conversation.
Yeah.
Russ,
So, go ahead.
I just like, can we ask you questions about this CIP, or should we just, I don't know how much detail you can provide on some of
Outside of what's in the narrative, I'm probably not going to give you too much more than that, because it's what's been written in there as the task list for the project. So I think you can maybe, if you want to take it to a further degree and put a couple of questions together, I think we can go back to the department with those.
Can I just ask that, do you know if there's an assessment of the existing fuel island?
I do not know the answer to that question.
So ultimately, going back to your comments, Peter, I think which are, to me, still appropriate, is that if the scope of work that was up here had to do with the surveying and the delineations of a parcel of land that the town of Exeter owned, I would be in support of that. I don't, when it starts to migrate into the fuel island and a bunch of other things which we asked about having a master plan 2 years ago, seems to be that what happened to the master plan, what happened to the planning portion of this, and are we accepting the document that came out last year without the backup information that was requested.
So the way that I'm reading this is that, and I agree with what you said, Rob. All this stuff as far as what information has been provided, but it looks like to me that there's identification that the fuel island, right, is in poor condition, and that they're in FY23 will be asking to replace that. And the replacement is the priority, and then FY24-25, you can see there's the new Public Works facility. But the idea is that this placement of the fuel island, they want to do that facilities master plan, right? They want to do the plan for that. That, to me, is what they're asking for, although it's not, I don't think it's communicated well in this text. But is that they want this to be sited, located in that bigger context, right? Which I agree with, that even if we don't support the new building, I think that they should look at it that way. I guess I know when we walked this over a year ago, I don't even know when it was, that was the priority, was the fuel island. I guess that's where, regardless if you feel like that the the new pre-engineered building or whatever they want to do is a priority. If the fuel island is a priority and we agree that it's a priority, then I would, I guess, in general, agree that they should look at this as the whole site, right? Not just design a new fuel island, put it in the exact same spot, because that's what we had talked about them not doing. So, but I don't know what it's not clear to me what the 75,000 is exactly going to do, but that's why I was asking if there's an assessment of the existing fuel island, if there's, somebody other than DPW has looked at it and says it's reached the end of its useful life. If there's...
So could that be one of the questions we ask is to get fleshed out would be is that, the condition of the fuel island or ultimately, or what is the long-term plan for master planning the area and which one's the priority?
I'm typing questions now if you guys want me to do that.
That sounds good, and
Send them to us and we'll disseminate to the various departments to try to get.
Okay.
You guys go through the list, does that?
Yeah.
That does.
And we have 24 minutes.
I was going to ask,
I know,
So,
saying,
in 1 week or less than 1 week to get it out, right?
we'll do our very best.
No, I'm criticizing us, not you.
yeah, there's no way we're going to get
Yeah,
through all of this
so-
today.
So you guys get the information out. It's us that we can't, because we're just, whatever.
And let me just say,
This write-up goes beyond just the fuel island.
Yeah.
It says it's so the architect and site engineer can collaborate on locating facilities and fuel islands with site circulation in mind. That's basically saying that they've got a concept about what they want to do, and they want an architect and an engineer to lay it out. And I think, frankly, that they are way ahead of themselves. If they just want to have an architect and an engineer work on where they want to put the the island with some general, I don't even know how they do that unless they have a better idea of how the rest of the complex. So, I mean, this is just another.
But I think that's my interpretation of it, though, Peter. I mean, that's just my opinion. I think that's what they're trying to use this money for, is that. But I don't think that.
So I think the question there is, that if I was going to paraphrase that, would be is, how does this fit into the plan that was developed in 2020 or 2019 for the new garage and maintenance facility?
Okay.
So let me just draft. So I'm drafting a draft. So first of all, question: has there been a third-party review of the existing fuel island? Does everybody agree with that question?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yes,
I've
definitely.
got 6 other questions that I think need to be asked about this. And they
Make it
were
quick.
No, they were in the document that you sent around everybody.
All right.
Yeah, I looked at it quickly, but I have that up right here.
So I would ask people to look at those and see whether or not
Information Department.
those are valid questions, valid enough to talk about asking for this particular project. But what we're doing is we are avoiding the question of whether or not they should be put into a process similar to the process that we use for the Public Safety Center. Because unless we get some independent guidance, like the Public Safety Center study, I don't know how we can have any faith in what the Department of Public Works wants to do, especially since they've been unwilling to share any kind of information with us. And the information they share only is partially explained to us and shows that as time wears on, their appetite for what they want to do and spend only gets larger. So I think we really need to think more than just saying, okay, if we can drive them into just doing the fuel island, then the $75,000 may be justified. I think we needed to ask ourselves whether or not we should tell them to go back to square one with a study that's similar to what we did for the Public Safety Center. I mean, why can't they do a study for $35,000 that's an operational analysis that gives the town some kind of better idea of what they really need? Because when we ask them what they really need, it goes from a 15,000 square foot building to a 40,000 square foot building. in the space of a few months. And it goes from, the current site to a current site plus another 4.5 acres. I'm not saying those are bad ideas, but I don't have any faith that anybody's looking at this in the kind of way that it ought to be looked at. Because this, at the end of the day, whether it's the fuel island or whether it's the fuel island plus, it's going to compete with the public safety center. And it may compete with the community center, even though these are in the out years. We're going to have to think about that. And so I don't want to take another step until we've got a better handle on it.
So Peter, I'm looking at your question that you sent. You have a question that is number 5. Is the current DPW concept for its complex based on meeting town needs for the next 30 to 50 years or the next 20 to 25? I don't see one particular what you're saying as far as the study, but so, I mean.
Well, that's based on what they gave us last year at the end, which showed the 40,000 square foot building and had references to meeting the needs of the town for the next 30 to 50 years. All of this was based on, not all of it, a large part of this was based on what they gave us last year at the end of the process, but then refused to provide us any additional information. Right. So again, it's beyond just the fuel island.
Right. I understand that. I'm just trying to narrow down the questions that we feel like we should ask. So, because I think this is a good question, but I think it gets into, are we recommending that there be an operational study of the Department of Public Works? That's what you're referencing, though, right, Peter?
That's the first question.
Right.
We first have to ask that, and then we can make a decision as to whether or not the fuel island is so important that before all of that other work is done, or despite that other work being done, we have to press forward on it, not knowing where it's going to be and not knowing how it might fit into the larger picture of what the Public Works Department does. I'm not trying to force the Public Works Department to live with these facilities that much longer, but I don't know why 1 year or 2 years more or less is so critical that we have to spend money now on some of this, as opposed to going back to a square one about an operational analysis for them and then a feasibility study that comes from the operational analysis.
So I'm just trying to narrow this. I think it's a fair question to ask is should there be an operational study done at the Department of Public Works, right? So, that way that they can evaluate, according to what we've been told in that little paragraph, that they've done a programming exercise, right? And they mentioned that in that write-up. So, I'm just trying to narrow this down because we're running out of time. So, as far as, is that a question that we want to pose that has this study been done? And if not, do we want to recommend one?
Well, nothing they've given, it's worth asking the question, but nothing they've given us so far would indicate that they've done any kind of study like that. They say that in fiscal 19 and 20, the architect conducted an analysis of the existing facility and performed the programming for a new facility. How do we know what the architect looked at? And how do we know whether or not the architect made any of the kinds of judgments that we had the independent consultants for the public safety study do? Sure, ask them whether or not they did an operational analysis, but again, the more we buy into them telling us what they need without a more independent perspective on it for a building that's going to be a major anchor in our funding.
Yeah,
for the next few years.
I'm leaning towards agreeing with you, Peter. I'm just trying to understand. I think first we don't have the DPW can't answer this, so I think we should try to get some questions that we can. Yeah. If they say no, one has not been done, we have not looked at that. Then we could say, okay, well, maybe we should recommend one.
And how this all started, obviously, was with a replacement of the existing garage.
Right.
So, per what I think Peter's asking is how did we get from replacing the garage to where we are today? And I think that's the transparency that we're asking for, is that where are we? What is it? How does this fit into the big picture? That's what we asked for, almost 2 years ago, which is how does this all fit together? Because it doesn't. We want it to be successful. We want the project to go forward. We want it to meet the town's needs. We don't want to continue to go around and around and bite ourselves in the butt here.
All right, so we got to figure out a way to make the best use of the last 10 minutes of our time here.
Should we have another meeting? Honestly, I don't want to add it to everybody's plate, but because
We're going to need something.
if we're going to try to do this, get something to the town in a reasonable manner so they can be prepared and to answer the questions and if we attend Thursday. I think these are good questions that were raised. These are things that we have an opportunity that we've been talking about for a while, right? So
Yeah.
I think that Peter's raising some really strong points about, because we all had questioned this, about how it grew from existing facility of 15,000 to 40,000, whatever the numbers are for square foot. So, I think these are good for us to be able to do that. And then maybe it's about, then they have to prioritize about the fuel island if that's the number one priority.
Agreed.
Yep.
Yeah, let's put a pin in that one for now. I'm sorry to cut off, but
Yeah.
let's just try to envision how we get the information out in a timely manner. So if you folks submit it to your heads, when would you need that by? Like next Monday or Tuesday or ASAP?
Get it by the 26th to the next CFP meeting, is that what you're saying?
Well, and then how will we disseminate it and discuss it on the 26th? Would we discuss it live with them there, or how's that meeting on the 26th going to transpire? Is it just, the department heads have already presented, so.
Yeah, the planning board meeting, the second public hearing to adopt the CIP is August 26th.
Yeah, that's a week from today.
And that is when they would go through the document and presumably adopt it with any recommendations that they would make to the next bodies that get the report. That's why I say your questions may not make that deadline, because it depends on how in-depth they are and sort of what you're looking for background.
I see.
But I think no matter what happens, if you even if you were to miss the 26th deadline, I call it a deadline, but if you were to miss the 26th, it doesn't preclude you from getting the questions out to the departments and us getting responses back to you, which then can be used throughout the budget process. This is a multi-month process, so we're used to getting questions, and if we get them a week or two after, I don't think that that's going to be an impediment.
So then the next phase would be the budget recommendations committee process, right?
Correct, after that.
Yeah, so then that's where we would be able to because if we miss it for the 26th, we get the questions out, it gets adopted by the planning board, but then during that next process is then when we can get more involved.
Right.
And maybe get these questions answered and be able to help with some of be able to propose some changes.
Right, and there'll be a review by the BRC subcommittees
Yeah.
dealing specifically with CIP items. So that's another, that's an avenue in on that process.
Yes. Okay. So
I guess the question is, should we send a letter to the planning board that says we've not acted on a couple things. A, we focused on primarily the FY22 projects, the funding in the FY22 as the questions of immediate issue. Two, we can't make a recommendation on those two projects because we need more information from the town. We're reserving judgment on them. We're not saying no, we're not saying yes, but we have some questions that we think need to be raised. We've submitted those questions to the town for them to answer, and we've attached them to this letter so you know what we're thinking.
And if we were to send that to the planning board, should we send it just from the consideration of what the planning board is thinking about with CIP, or would it just be our general comments on it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I
Can we
guess-
just give them information that's helpful to them and not bombard them with stuff that may not be?
Well, who knows? I mean, I don't know what the planning board, finds useful or not, because I haven't been on it. And so I don't know whether if we send them these questions, they're going to find them useful or not. I guess my idea is to send them the questions just so they know what we're thinking of. Even if they don't find those questions useful for them, at least we're out on the record saying, hey, we've got questions here that need to be addressed. and we'll intend to address them during the budget process. And so that's why we can't make a recommendation for or against.
So that would be something we need to send prior to the 26th.
Yeah.
So,
If that makes any sense, if you guys think that's just a BS idea, then let's not do it. But if there's any value to it, then let's consider that. And I'll defer to you guys. I've said what I said.
yeah, I'm still thinking. I don't have a hard and fast definitive approach to,
Are we meeting next Thursday as a committee?
no.
Okay, because I had that on my calendar.
First and third.
Okay, my calendar, sorry, I still had that on my calendar, then I just.
Okay, so we meet first and third Thursdays of the month. I mean, if we wanted to do a meeting sooner to flesh out the rest of these questions, we could.
So the reason I'm sorry to bring that up, so we could send the planning board an update saying that we're doing this, that we're still in the process of doing this, and that, is that what you're saying, Peter? I mean, basically to say that we just haven't had a chance to be able to.
Yeah, I want to do what we did last year, and that is send them our opinion to the extent we can, so that they get used to us sending them our opinion.
Yeah.
They found our opinion the last time, I think, helpful, because they approved what we recommended. And so I just want to fulfill our part of the process and our charge that says advise the planning board.
Right.
Even if we can't advise them more than just, hey, these are questions to think about.
Well, I mean, I guess, are we going to have time to be able to do that and be able to give something that is a document that we feel that it's not rushed to the planning board, other than just saying, look, we've missed.
Right.
We recognize that we missed last week and that we're developing this. We do have questions, we reserve judgment.
Yeah.
Except for the FCA.
Right. No, that's right. That's a good point, because I forgot completely about the FCA.
Oh, that's true.
So I'm gonna say we fully support that.
Yeah, we have to say, so yeah, we have to send a letter for that. We have to put that in a
Well,
letter,
yeah.
regardless of whether we say anything about anything else.
Yeah.
So I guess the question is, from not a protocol, but from a 91A, can one of us write a draft of a letter? And then do we have to have a meeting to approve it or change it? We can't talk about it among ourselves.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, we
With the
should be
elect- right.
something we vote on.
I'm not trying to say we should end run that. I just want to make sure that we have to do it.
Yeah,
Okay, so.
it is something we need to vote on.
And we can't do Zoom anymore, right? Because there's no longer, I mean, I don't know, does a new COVID, does the latest surge justify Zoom meetings? No, seriously,
A physical quorum has to be present in the room.
okay,
And someone else can be on Zoom if there's a physical quorum in the room.
got it, okay.
So do we want to meet, I don't know, Monday or Tuesday of next week or something, or earlier? I don't know.
I had it on my calendar for Thursday, so.
You can be the representative who would.
Yeah, it is, but we're earlier.
Trying to get it before the planning board, you'd have to meet before Thursday, right?
Oh, to get it to the packet.
Sounds like
Well,
you're
saying-
available.
Right.
I was just thinking we were just
Sounds
leave it
like
on the desk for them when they
Oh, you mean
showed
just
up.
like you could bring it there?
Yeah, I think-
Bring it to.
Yes.
To them?
Yeah, I mean, if it's really just a process that they're, I mean, the departments are not going to be there on Thursday. Is that correct?
That's a good question I don't have the answer for yet.
Yeah, I mean, it
Right.
sounded like, I mean, I'll just look at the agenda. There's a lot on the agenda for next Thursday.
Right.
So if it's just them, finalizing and voting,
Yeah.
So since you have that open, you can attend the meeting on
Just stay
behalf-
right
Every time I get a question, I have to run back to the microphone. This is good exercise.
Yeah.
But to the point, yeah, next Thursday with the planning board will be their second public hearing, and I think that the departments are not likely to be there because it's just all the presentations have been made at this point, and it's just the final process.
yeah.
Gotcha.
I mean, I could try to meet earlier too. I was just joking as far as it's on my calendar, but.
Yeah, I do not have next
Yeah,
Thursday.
I can meet Tuesday and Wednesday. Not Wednesday. I can meet Tuesday. Or early Thursday.
I don't know what my Tuesday,
Well, if we get 3 people that can be here and you want to, if you could Zoom in, right?
yeah. Yeah, we could do that. So our goal would be just to finish going through the CIP items and finishing our questions.
Consolidate.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess so. But we didn't. I mean, we jump around, but we didn't. So it's for the planning board. If we want to be able to give them, I guess, to say that, you know, obviously we support the FCA CIP, but then are we going to say the other ones we reserve judgment on the rest, and we'll provide comments at the BRC process? I mean, it doesn't.
But as the process continues, we don't have to say the
Yeah, as the
BRC,
process
yeah.
continues, because why give them our questions, because they're going to be looking at this Thursday and saying, well, we're going to vote for this now, so.
Do you want me to draft a letter?
Yeah, I think that would be good. If we can get something in advance-
It'll be a relatively speaking short letter
Yeah.
with attachments that are just the questions. These are the questions we have attached, you know, but the letter's going to say basically support the FCA, reserve judgment, we reserve judgment on the others because we have questions. Those questions are attached, you know, for you to think about.
And is the planning board evaluating each CIP item on its own? It's not, or is it all items in one bucket that they move along?
No, they get the document, so they can look at each and every project. Yeah, I think it's probably important to point out, and I'll do this, that the CIP are also estimates. When the town departments put together the CIP, they're always dealing in estimates. These aren't bid prices. These aren't, you know, they're not necessarily what is happening to this day out on the street. And I know that their track record, I'll go out and say, for several years has been really good as far as when they go out to bid, we typically hit the price pretty close. So, but I just wanted to say that they are estimates that you're looking at.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Understood.
Well, I mean, that's what ours is. So,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, so I guess just as far as the formality, Chris, do you
Yeah.
want, I mean, maybe we start with a draft. I'm just not sure we all will be able to agree that these are the questions that we want to share with the planning board in advance without all of us going through them and vetting them.
Oh, yeah, and.
Right, so that's why I'm just saying, as far as, do we just have a letter saying we have questions, we reserve judgment on the rest, but we'll be submitting those or be for the process going forward or whatever. I mean, Peter, you're good at drafting the letters.
Yeah, give me the questions that you wanted. I'll throw in the questions I want, and people can say yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. Okay, I mean,
Okay.
I'm not going to, I mean,
Yeah.
they're self-explanatory, but again, you know, I'm not going to argue about them.
Right.
Or
Right.
extended debate on it.
I mean, we can say these are draft questions.
Yeah.
And Chris, were there any additional items that were in the packet that you were given that were not in the original? Are there any differences between those?
That's a good question.
So if you could forward those, I guess.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I've just breezed through this very quickly. You know, it includes everything, including
What are you looking
vehicles.
at? Is that the planning board packet?
Yeah, this is the
Yeah.
planning board packet.
Oh, so that's just online?
Yeah, this is what was online,
Yeah.
so,
But that's the whole CIP. Dave gave us what he considered to be the facilities directly
Yeah.
but
related
that
facilities.
was a little older though, too. I don't know
And
if it's been tweaked.
Was that older?
Oh, here we go.
Is it 2022?
What was those numbers?
Oh, that's water and sewer
Yeah, that's
trucks. Oh, here we go. And then, yeah, so I guess Rob, too, you and I, if we can come up with any questions,
You just send them to me.
we'll send them to Peter.
Yeah.
And so are we going to meet to vet this one last time, or are we just going to
I think we have to.
send out a final draft and,
Well, if there's a doubt that all these questions are useful or relevant, then I think we have to meet.
okay. I think meeting prior to Thursday would be good, just to have that done. If you want to leave something with the planning board, it'd be good to.
Oh, yeah.
I can meet Tuesday if we do the same time, 4 o'clock.
All right, I'll have to look at my schedule, but, all right, we'll tentatively schedule a meeting for Tuesday at 4. And then whatever we can get done in advance, any homework to get the questions drafted in advance to make our discussion times.
Yeah, and guys, if you look at the list of questions that I wrote, and just yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, and I'll defer to your judgment.
Okay.
So can I just bring to attention that you're looking at?
Yeah, this is one thing I wanted to bring up. Like, Peter, when you talk about competing things and what's going to be on the books
Yeah.
coming down the road. I was kind of interested in a little more clarity on this.
Russ, is this why you you put this together, correct?
Is that's different from what you and the budget committee are trying to put together too, right, Russ, or is this it?
No, I think that's.
This is in the packet also.
22 through 27.
Yeah, so those are, what you see on the top there is existing debt service that is already on our books. And the area below that are proposed projects that are in the CIP.
Oh, that's great.
And what it does is it makes assumptions about term of borrowing and percentages and puts them out in the years that we would normally see if they were funded. So Pickpocket Dam Design Engineering, I'll just pick out the top project from the second batch. That's $300,000, and that anticipates a 5-year note on that we'd begin paying back in FY23. So when those numbers are in there. And then when you scroll down a little further, you get basically the proposed debt service gets added to what's current, and it gives a new number of total debt service, and then shows what that amount is for a $300,000 home. And then it shows what the total debt service cost is approved and projected for a $300,000 home across the board. So basically, the way I've described this is if everything is funded by FY27 that you see on the list, and that doesn't include the safety complex, but it would be $300.15 out of the town tax bill would be dedicated to the debt service to pay on those projects. So 103 is already in the queue. You can see it at FY27 because it's on the top. It's in the top lines there. But it's 103 plus another 196.67 equals the $300.15.
Okay.
Yeah, for a $300,000 house.
Where's the one?
Yes, exactly.
$100 a.
Up here, Peter, I don't know if you can see the
We need to pick
cursor.
a point where we estimate it, and
I see.
that's where we pick the point.
So you don't have public safety because you don't know the cost.
Right, we don't have a cost.
Or the DPW
Yeah,
card.
same thing, you don't have the cost.
Right.
So is there a target number on this? Because you can start to play with this a little bit, I think, right? By putting in values, but also what year.
Right, so $500,000 in debt service is 23 cents on the tax rate. That's a good way to think about it. $1 million is double that.
Yeah.
46 cents, and then you multiply that by 3 if it's a $300,000 home to give you the dollar figure.
But on that bottom, total debt service, I just lost my page, but that we're just talking about, that's to the $300,000 home. Is there a number that is kind of like the target that we don't want to go over, like that, the increase to that?
Well, the philosophy with debt service is that you always try to keep it as smooth as you can.
Okay.
Over the years, so it doesn't fluctuate in big chunks from year over year.
Right.
But what you can account for in that smoothing theory are large-scale facilities.
Yeah.
They inevitably upset the apple cart on that smoothing because they're some of the most expensive things you'll do as a community. So there isn't necessarily a target. I think the target is more about the increase and what that would mean to the $300,000 homeowner and whether that's palatable. It is a little bit of a subjective exercise.
Yeah.
Is it worth $100 more in my tax bill to support a $12 million or $15 million public safety facility when it comes to that?
This is what we had talked about a while ago, was so that you can really start to see when you have these multiple projects that are adding up, right? That you talk about the smoothing.
Yeah, and they showed.
I keep putting things
To
off.
mark on the top where things come off the books too, so.
Yeah, I know, which is good, but that's what I'm saying. So as far as that, you have, like we were talking about this a year ago, the Parks and Rec, right? You have these competing big projects coming up that all of a sudden in about 3 years, you could have a lot of them trying to hit the books at the same time. And so you get that big increase that you're talking about, right? Because you have some big ones coming. Yeah, okay, I get it.
Right.
This is good.
And that's a consistent challenge that you have. All town managers face the same sheet of music, on that.
Obviously, this year will be interesting to obviously somebody's doing the analysis on what's going to happen on the infrastructure bill and what it is going to be the potential of some funding sources beyond what the town has to fund.
Yeah, federal funds.
Yeah, I believe it when I see it.
So Russ, if we took the the CIP page from the Public Works Department and took it, the dates at its word, couldn't we put, I guess, 2024, 2025 in for the Public Works garage or whatever, DPW facility garage? I mean, couldn't you put it 2024, 2025 there for debt service notional consideration?
I mean, you could. I don't know how relevant that would be because we don't know at this point what those dates look like. And then, obviously, I don't think it's a wise thing to put a figure in there either. So instead of just doing it sort of off the cuff, I think waiting. If you see that schedule, you'll notice that things are pushed out, right? We're talking about FY22 in this fiscal year cycle, and you can see that there's nothing on FY22's books that's coming on the books. That's a little bit by design to give us a little bit more time to chew on some of these issues that we need to really consider.
Russ, here's the other question too. Obviously, in your calculations, obviously, this is a, the valuation of the town. Do you have a number in which you place into this that it equates to the valuation over time?
Yes, so we'll increase the value in the out years by like a nominal percentage. So it will go up 1% a year maybe.
Right.
When we had the reval, obviously, all bets were off. That's the year that town values went up, much, much greater than that.
From a smoothing or whatever the words are perspective, why would you have, are you contemplating in this chart that both the public safety facility and the DPW garage are both going to be beginning in 2023?
Which ones, Peter?
The DPW, I'm sorry I can't see this from my desk, I apologize.
No, it's okay.
The public safety facility and the DPW facility garage construction are both in fiscal '23.
Potentially, yeah.
Potentially.
Yeah.
No, I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's the earliest.
Not even addressing whether or not the CIP from the DPW is accurate. What was the thinking about was there any thought of phasing them at least a year apart?
Oh, well, I think that is one of the questions we have on the table is it going to be in our interest to phase those projects? And I think what we've learned in the past is that that's a good idea. So
I think this is very helpful for us to understand because I think this is where
it's a guide.
Yeah, it's a guide, but also to understand these potential impacts. And you explain the philosophy of smoothing it. It's good, but I mean, if you start plugging in some of these big numbers, and there's going to be a big significant jump in FY23 and FY24.
But this also supports the idea that on a deferred maintenance side of things, this is the same kind of chart you'd want to see from a deferred maintenance standpoint, so you'd know that if I've got 3 big boiler replacements, when do I want 3 big boiler replacements to happen, or whatever else it's going to be, and how does that plug into this? So that's
exactly right.
When we implemented ours, that's what we did. We basically took the deferred maintenance and we did it over a 20-year period, and then we had an idea about what was needed on a yearly basis, and then from a budgetary standpoint, you'd be able to go in and determine, say, this is a number 1 or this is a number 5. We're going to move this out of this year because it can't be funded this year because it's competing with something else.
All right, so we're a little over time. Anybody have any last comments on any of this stuff?
I move to adjourn.
Well, before we do that, let me just finalize. So we're going to try to get together next Tuesday at 4.
Works fine.
Try to draft your questions and bring them with, and we'll invite.
Send them to me, don't wait.
Send them to Peter.
Just send them to me.
All right.
I'm just going to make a list, and I'll put them all in, and then we'll just Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no.
We'll invite our usual crew, but you don't have to come if you can't make it, so. And I guess with that, now we can move to adjourn. So you made the motion?
I make a motion to adjourn?
Second, okay, so.
Yes.
So let's adjourn.
Yes.
Mark, Peter?
Yes.
Yes.
Rob, and I vote to adjourn as well. Thank you, everyone, and I guess we'll see you in a few days.
Thank you for tuning in to Exeter TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast channels 98 and 22. Channel 98 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and replay coverage of government meetings and other town updates. A third channel, Blue Hawk Media, is operated by SAU 16 and can be found on Channel 13, with all your school sports, events, and meetings. You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Biweekly Report, with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive monthly updates about new content, upcoming meetings, and more. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch Exeter TV and hope that you tune in to our other content as well.